I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change.
Everyone expected the next royal drama to involve Harry. Nobody expected this. On March 25th, 2026, Prince William made a move so deliberate and so ruthless that even insiders were stunned, targeting someone from inside the Queen's own bloodline. Who exactly was expelled? And why did Princess Anne say absolutely nothing? Join us as we uncover the royal purge nobody saw coming. The grandson. At the center of the storm. To understand why this story matters, you first have to understand who is at the center of it, because this is not a story about a distant relative or a forgotten family member. This is a story about someone who grew up in the warmth of the Queen's world, attended the same gatherings, moved through the same spaces, and was by every visible measure considered part of the inner circle. Camilla has 5 grandchildren through her 2 children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, and for years those grandchildren occupied a quietly unusual position inside the royal world. They were not royals, they carried no titles, held no official roles, and had no constitutional standing of any kind. Yet they were present, visible, and warmly included in ways that blurred the line between private family and public institution. That blurring was always going to create a problem, and now it has. The grandchild at the center of this story became, perhaps without ever intending to, a symbol of something much larger than themselves. A symbol of how far Camilla's family had traveled from the outside edges of royal life toward its very heart. Every Christmas appearance, every private gathering, every moment of visible inclusion had quietly built a picture in the public mind. A picture of a family that, while technically unofficial, felt increasingly embedded. And that picture is exactly what William decided he could no longer allow. But the impact of what happened on March 25th, 2026, did not stop with one grandchild. It rippled outward through the entire Parker Bowles and Lopes family, sending a message that was impossible to misread. The boundaries were being redrawn, not gently and not gradually, but decisively and all at once, and everyone connected to Camilla through blood rather than title was now on the outside of those boundaries looking in. For a family that had spent years carefully and quietly building a place for itself inside the world's most famous institution, that moment represented something devastating, not just personally, but symbolically. The grandson at the center of the storm did not ask to become a symbol, but in the world of royal politics, individuals rarely get to choose what they represent. And right now, this young person represents something the monarchy is determined to make very clear. Proximity to the crown is not the same as belonging to it. The rise of Camilla's family, inside the palace. It did not happen overnight, and it did not happen by accident. It happened gradually, carefully, and in a way that felt so natural at the time that most people simply did not notice how far things had moved until they had already moved a very long way. When Camilla married Charles in 2005, her children Tom and Laura were adults with their own lives, their own careers, and their own public identities that existed entirely outside the royal world. Tom was building his reputation as a food writer. Laura was working quietly in the art world, and neither of them was expected to become a fixture in royal life in any meaningful sense. They were the stepchildren of the Prince of Wales, nothing more and nothing less, and the general understanding was that they would remain comfortably on the periphery. But time has a way of shifting these things. As Charles and Camilla grew more settled, as their relationship became more publicly accepted, and their domestic life more openly shared, Camilla's children, and eventually her grandchildren, began appearing with greater frequency in spaces that had previously been reserved for those with official royal standing. The 2023 coronation marked a significant moment in this process, with members of Camilla's family present in ways that felt deliberately visible. Their inclusion, a statement of sorts about how seriously the new king took his wife's personal world. Christmas gatherings followed a similar pattern, with Camilla's family joining the wider royal celebrations in a way that generated warm coverage and reinforced the image of a blended, modern royal family, comfortable enough in its own identity to include people who did not fit the traditional mold. For a while, it worked beautifully. The public responded warmly, the press coverage was largely positive, and the image of Camilla as a queen finally at peace, surrounded by her family and accepted at last, was a genuinely compelling one. But inside the institution, a different conversation was happening, a quieter and considerably less comfortable one about what this gradual normalization actually meant, where it was heading, and whether anyone had thought carefully enough about the line between welcoming a family and absorbing one. That line, it turned out, was exactly what William had been watching all along, and he had already decided it had been crossed. The problem. William couldn't ignore. There is a word that started appearing in quiet conversations about Camilla's family somewhere around the time of the coronation, and that word is royal adjacent. It is a polite word, a careful word, the kind of word people use when they want to describe a problem without quite saying what the problem is, but the problem it describes is actually very serious, and William understood that long before most people were willing to admit it. Royal adjacent means close to the crown without being of the crown, present in royal spaces without holding royal status, visible enough to shape public perception without being accountable to the institution in any official way. And in small doses, for brief periods, that kind of arrangement is manageable, it is even understandable, because royal families are still families, and human relationships do not always fit neatly into constitutional boxes. But Camilla's family had moved beyond small doses. Their presence had become regular, their visibility had become significant, and the public perception of who they were had shifted in a direction that William found deeply troubling. Ordinary people watching the royal family, particularly those who do not follow every detail closely, had begun to develop a blurred understanding of where the official royal family ended and Camilla's private family began. Tom Parker Bowles appeared at royal-adjacent events with the ease of someone entirely at home in that world. Camilla's grandchildren were photographed in contexts that carried royal associations. The visual language of inclusion had done its work so effectively that the distinction between official and unofficial had quietly started to dissolve. For William, this was not a minor image problem, it was an institutional one, and he has always been clear that institutional problems require institutional solutions. His concern was straightforward. If the boundaries of the royal family become unclear, if ordinary people cannot tell who is actually part of the crown and who is simply close to someone who is, then the authority and meaning of the institution itself begins to weaken. The crown derives its power partly from its exclusivity, from the clarity of who it represents and who speaks in its name. And anything that clouds that clarity is, in William's view, a direct threat. The problem William could not ignore was not personal, it was structural, and structural problems, as everyone close to him already knew, were exactly the kind he was least willing to leave unresolved. William's ruthless vision for the monarchy. To understand why William did what he did on March 25th, you first have to understand what William actually believes, because his actions do not come from emotion or impulse. They come from a very deeply held vision of what the monarchy is, what it is for, and what it must become if it is going to survive the century ahead. William believes in a slimmed-down monarchy, and he believes in it with a conviction that goes far beyond preference or opinion. In his view, the royal family should be a tight, focused, working institution made up of people with genuine public roles, clear responsibilities, and a visible reason for existing in the eyes of ordinary people. Every person connected to the crown should be able to justify their connection through service, through function, and through demonstrable value to the public they represent. If you cannot do that, in William's framework, you do not belong inside the institution. This thinking did not appear from nowhere. It was shaped by everything he witnessed growing up. Diana showed him what the monarchy could be at its most powerful, a force genuinely connected to ordinary people, capable of generating real warmth and real trust, and he absorbed that lesson completely. But Diana also showed him what the institution looked like when it prioritized its own traditions over genuine relevance, and he has spent his adult life determined not to repeat that failure. The scandals he watched unfold around him reinforced the lesson from a different direction. Every controversy, every embarrassing headline, every moment where a royal figure became a liability rather than an asset, taught him the same thing, that the monarchy's goodwill with the public is not unlimited. It is a resource that can be depleted, and protecting it requires discipline and sometimes difficult decisions. Andrew's situation, which we will come to, was the moment that discipline became action, But the thinking behind it had been forming in William for years before that. What makes William's vision genuinely ruthless is not that it is unkind, it is that it is impersonal. He is not making decisions based on whether he likes someone or feels warmly toward them. He is making decisions based on whether they serve a function within the structure he is building. Personal affection, family loyalty, historical connection. None of these things override the central question. And the central question is always the same. What role do you serve, and does the institution need you to serve it? The warning shot. Before the purge. Before William moved against Camilla's grandson, he had already shown the world exactly what he was capable of, and he had done it in the most visible and unambiguous way possible. The story of Prince Andrew is not just a royal scandal, it is a blueprint, a clear and carefully executed demonstration of how William approaches threats to the institution he is preparing to lead. Andrew's problems had been building for years before they became impossible to ignore. His friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted sex offender with connections to some of the most powerful people in the world, had long been a source of deep unease among those close to the royal family. But it was Andrew's decision to sit down for a live television interview in 2019, apparently convinced he could resolve the situation through charm and explanation, that transformed a serious problem into an absolute catastrophe. The interview was a disaster on a scale that is difficult to overstate. Within hours of it airing, the damage was visible to everyone, and the public reaction was swift, angry, and completely unforgiving. Andrew had not just failed to clear his name, he had made everything dramatically worse. And in doing so, he had dragged the institution into a controversy that threatened to overshadow everything else the royal family was trying to do. Most senior royals responded in the way that royal culture tends to encourage, with careful distance, measured silence, and a studied neutrality that avoided direct confrontation. William responded differently. Those with knowledge of the internal conversations that followed made it very clear that William pushed firmly, consistently, and without sentiment for Andrew to be removed from public royal life entirely, his military titles stripped, his patronages ended, and his presence at official events permanently curtailed. By early 2022, that is exactly what happened, and the message it sent was loud and clear, even though it was delivered without a single public word from William himself. The message was this: the era of protecting people because of who they are rather than what they contribute is over, and no amount of history, seniority, or family connection will shield someone who has become a liability to the crown. William had shown his hand clearly. He was willing to act, willing to cut, and willing to absorb the discomfort of doing so in the service of the institution. The question was never whether he would act again. It was only a matter of who and when. The confrontation behind palace walls. Not everything that shapes royal history happens in public, and some of the most consequential moments never appear in any official record at all. What happened between William and Camilla in the period leading up to March 25th, 2026 belongs to that category, a private confrontation that those with knowledge of it describe as one of the most tense and emotionally charged exchanges the modern royal family has witnessed behind closed doors. The tension had been building for some time. As William's intentions regarding the shape of the future monarchy became increasingly clear to those around him, and as his concerns about the visibility and perceived status of Camilla's family grew more difficult to contain, a collision became inevitable. William, by those who know him best, is described as someone who does not avoid difficult conversations indefinitely. He simply waits until he is certain of his position before having them, and by the time he sat down with Camilla, he was very certain indeed. The substance of William's position, as understood by those close to the situation, was direct and unsparing. He believed that Camilla had allowed her family to accumulate a level of proximity and visibility within the royal world that was institutionally inappropriate and publicly confusing, and that this had happened gradually enough that it had gone unchallenged for too long. His concern was not personal animosity toward Tom, Laura, or the grandchildren. It was structural, and he made that distinction deliberately and clearly. Camilla's reaction, by all accounts, was not passive. She is described by those who have observed her closely as someone with considerable quiet strength. A person who survived years of public hostility and came through it with her dignity intact, and she brought that strength into the room with her. She reportedly pushed back against what she characterized as an overreach, arguing that her family's presence in her life was a private matter, and that William's intervention crossed the line between institutional governance and personal control. The emotional undercurrent of that confrontation runs deeper than policy or protocol, because sitting beneath every word exchanged was a history that neither of them can fully escape. William is the son of Diana, a woman whose suffering is inseparable from Camilla's story, and no amount of time or diplomacy has entirely dissolved that reality. Camilla knows it, William knows it, and in a room where both of them are speaking plainly, it is impossible to pretend otherwise. What was agreed, what was demanded, and what was simply left unresolved in that room set the stage for everything that followed, and on March 25th, the world saw the outcome, even if it never saw the conversation that produced it. The expulsion order, March 25th, 2026, is a date that will be studied by royal historians for years to come. Not because of what was announced publicly, but because of what was decided privately and what that decision revealed about the direction of the monarchy under its future king. Camilla's grandson, the young man who had grown up moving through royal spaces with the quiet ease of someone who belonged there, was to be excluded entirely from royal events, from the inner circle of palace life, and from any association that carried the visual or symbolic weight of royal identity. This was not a gentle stepping back. It was not a gradual reduction in appearances. It was a clean and complete severance, and everyone involved understood exactly what it meant. What made the expulsion order particularly significant was the reasoning behind it, because William was careful to frame this not as a personal decision, but as an institutional one, and that framing was deliberate and important. This was not, in his presentation of it, about punishing a young person for anything they had done wrong. It was about clarifying a boundary that had been allowed to blur for too long. The grandson had not committed any scandal, had not caused any controversy, and had not done anything that would justify removal on personal grounds. His only offense, if it can be called that, was existing too visibly inside a space that was never formally his to occupy. That distinction matters enormously because it tells you something crucial about the nature of William's thinking. A decision based on personal behavior can be reversed if behavior changes, but a decision based on institutional structure is permanent because the structure does not change. By framing the expulsion as structural rather than personal, William ensured that there was no obvious path back, no reform that could be undertaken, no apology that could be offered, because nothing wrong had been done in the first place. The boundary had simply been drawn, and the drawing of it was itself the message. For Camilla, the impact was profound and painful in ways that went far beyond the institutional. This was her grandchild, a young person she loves, being formally removed from a world that she had worked for decades to build a place within. Those close to her describe the aftermath of the March 25th mandate as one of the most difficult periods she has faced since the darkest days of public hostility following Diana's death. The public downgrade. If the expulsion order delivered its message in private, what followed delivered it in public, and the public dimension of what happened to Camilla's family in the weeks and months following March 25th, 2026, was designed to be seen, understood, and remembered. The changes were specific, visible, and carefully calibrated to communicate exactly one thing: that the era of royal adjacency for Camilla's family was over, and that the distance between them and the institution was now being measured and enforced in ways that anyone paying attention could observe. The first and perhaps most immediately striking change involved transportation. Royal cars, those sleek and unmistakable vehicles that carry the visual authority of the crown with them wherever they go, were no longer available to members of Camilla's extended family for events with any royal association. It sounds like a small thing, the kind of logistical detail that most people would never notice. But in the world of royal symbolism, it is anything but small. Arriving in a royal car places you inside the institution. It signals that the crown has sanctioned your presence and extended its protection to your movement. Removing that privilege signals the precise opposite, and everyone who understands the language of royal appearances understood the signal immediately. Then came the seating arrangements. At events where members of Camilla's family were still present, their positioning shifted in ways that were subtle but unmistakable to those familiar with how royal occasions are organized. Proximity to senior royals at formal events is not accidental. It is arranged, and it communicates hierarchy with a precision that no spoken announcement could match. The new arrangements placed Camilla's family in spaces that were respectable, but clearly and deliberately separate from the inner circle, close enough to avoid obvious humiliation, but far enough to make the boundary visible. The photographs told the same story. Where previously images had occasionally captured Camilla's grandchildren in proximity to senior working royals, in groupings that implied warmth and inclusion, those images stopped appearing. The visual record of the royal family began to reflect the new boundaries with the same precision that the seating plans and the car arrangements did. Each photograph a quiet but clear statement about who was inside the frame and who had moved outside it. Taken individually, each of these changes might be explained away as coincidence or logistical adjustment. But taken together, they formed a coherent and unmistakable pattern, a public choreography of demotion that required no announcement because it spoke entirely through imagery and arrangement. This is the language the monarchy has always used to communicate power, not through declarations, but through the visible organization of space, access, and proximity. And William was using it with the fluency of someone who had been studying it his entire life. For Camilla's family, the experience of this public downgrade was described by those familiar with the situation as deeply humiliating, not because anyone was cruel to them directly, but because the demotion was so visible, so deliberate, and so clearly designed to be understood by anyone watching. The walk of the commoner, as those close to the situation quietly described it, was not a punishment in any legal sense. It was a reclassification, and reclassifications in royal life tend to be permanent. Princess Anne. The silent approval. In a story full of loud decisions, dramatic confrontations, and visible demotions, Princess Anne has said nothing, and in the world of the British monarchy, that silence is one of the most meaningful things she could possibly do. Anne is the most disciplined working royal of her generation, a fact that is acknowledged even by those who do not particularly warm to her style. She has spent decades carrying out more public engagements per year than almost any other member of the family, doing so without complaint, without controversy, and without any apparent need for the kind of public validation that has undone others around her. She is not interested in being liked in the way that some royals are. She is interested in the institution functioning correctly, and she has organized her entire public life around that priority. This makes her silence on the events of March 25th, 2026, and everything that followed deeply significant, because Anne does not stay silent about things she disagrees with out of politeness or diplomacy. As she stays silent about things she agrees with, or at least things she has decided do not require her opposition. And there is a considerable difference between those two positions. Those who have observed Anne closely over many years describe her as someone with an exceptionally clear understanding of what the monarchy is and what it requires. Someone who has never confused the institution with the individuals who inhabit it, and who has always been willing to place the former above the latter when the two come into conflict. She watched the Andrew situation unfold with the same measured stillness she brings to everything. And while she never publicly endorsed William's push to remove him, she also never pushed back against it. And in Anne's world, the absence of opposition carries its own weight. Her relationship with William is built on a shared foundation that runs deeper than personal warmth. It is built on a shared ideology about what the monarchy is for. Both of them believe in service as the primary justification for royal existence. Both of them are deeply uncomfortable with the idea of the institution being used as a backdrop for personal advancement. And both of them have a low tolerance for the blurring of boundaries that Camilla's family's gradual inclusion represented. What those close to the situation suggest, carefully and without attribution, is that Anne's role in the events surrounding the March 25th mandate was not purely passive, that she was involved at some level in the formalization of the rules that gave William's actions their institutional grounding, providing the kind of quiet structural authority that only someone of her standing and experience within the family could provide. Whether or not the full details of that involvement ever become public, the effect of her silence is already clear. In a moment when a word from Anne could have complicated William's position or created space for a different outcome, she offered nothing of the sort, and in the monarchy, choosing not to speak is sometimes the most powerful thing you can do. Anne did not just watch, and her silence was never just silence. It was agreement, expressed in the only language the institution has ever truly understood: the New Royal Order. Everything that has unfolded these past few months, the quiet expulsion, the public demotion, the private confrontation, the deliberate restructuring of visibility and access, all of it points toward a single conclusion, and that conclusion is this: the future of the British monarchy has already been decided. And it was decided not in a throne room or a public announcement, but in the quiet, methodical actions of a man who has been preparing for this moment his entire life. King Charles III is still on the throne, and nobody is suggesting otherwise. But power in a monarchy does not always live where the crown sits, and increasingly, the gravitational center of the royal institution is shifting toward William, toward Kate, and toward the 3 children who will carry the Windsor name into the decades ahead. The Wales household has become, in every practical sense, the beating heart of the monarchy's future, and the world around it is being reorganized to reflect that reality. What is emerging is a royal order defined by its edges as much as its center, by who is included and who is not, by who appears on the balcony and who stands in a different room entirely. Camilla's family, the grandchildren who grew up brushing against the warmth of royal life, the children who built their identities partly in the glow of their mother's remarkable ascent, have been repositioned firmly and permanently outside those edges, not through scandal, not through failure, but through the simple application of a framework that was always going to reach them eventually. For Camilla herself, the position is one of profound complexity. She remains queen, her title is secure, and her place beside Charles is not in question. But the world her family inhabits has been irrevocably altered, and she knows better than anyone that when William becomes king, the protective warmth that Charles provides will be gone. And the new order will settle into place with a permanence that no future negotiation is likely to disturb. The story of March 25th, 2026 is not really a story about one grandson or one expulsion. It is a story about a vision, a ruthless, clear-eyed, and entirely deliberate vision of what the monarchy must become to survive. And the man who holds that vision is already, in every way that matters, building the kingdom he intends to keep. William didn't just expel a grandson, he redrew the boundaries of the crown, and those boundaries are not moving again.